All your inheritance became an abandoned farm. But a hidden secret changed everything. Sarah Miller received the news through a manila envelope that arrived without warning. The grandfather she had barely known had left his entire inheritance to her, and only to her. The initial excitement lasted only until the moment the lawyer explained, with a half-smile of pity, that the inheritance consisted of a completely abandoned farm in the countryside. When she finally managed to get to the place after 3 hours on a bus and another hour riding in the bed of an old pickup truck, what she found made her stomach turn. There was no house, but rather the rubble of something that might once have been a residence. The weeds grew so high you could barely see where the property ended. The wooden gate hung from a rusty hinge, and there was no sign of electricity, running water, or any basic infrastructure. "Are you old Mr. George's granddaughter?" A rough voice came from behind her. Sarah turned, startled. A man in his early 40s watched her with his arms crossed. He had sun-leathered skin and a look she couldn't decipher as curiosity or hostility. "I am. And you are?" "Ryan Miller, your cousin, your grandfather's brother's son." She didn't know she had cousins. In fact, she knew almost nothing about her father's family. Her father had disappeared when she was a child, and her mother never spoke about his relatives. "Nice to meet you," Sarah replied without much conviction. "Look, I'll be straight with you. This place here isn't worth anything. Dry land, no water, nothing. I'll do you a favor and buy it from you for $1,000. You take the money and go back to the town without a headache." $1,000. Sarah had debts that totaled almost double that. She had sold practically everything she owned before coming, hoping that this so-called inheritance would be something that could change her life. But something about her cousin's haste, the way he immediately offered money before even a proper greeting, set off an alarm inside her. "No, thank you. I'll keep it." Ryan's face closed off completely. "You'll regret it. This place here only brings work and loss. But fine, when you get tired of struggling, look me up. The offer won't last forever." He left without another word, leaving Sarah alone in that sea of weeds and destruction. She walked through the property, tripping over stones hidden by the vegetation, until she reached the remains of what had once been the house. The walls were still partially standing, but the roof had collapsed almost completely. Inside, everything smelled of mold and abandonment. There were broken furniture covered in dust, pieces of crockery scattered on the dirt floor, and a silence that weighed on her shoulders. Sarah sat on a rock and let the tears fall. What had she done? She had bet everything on this inheritance, and now she was here with no money to go back, no place to stay, with nothing. That first night was one of the worst of her life. She managed to gather some planks that seemed sturdy and created a minimally protected space in a corner of the ruined house. The cold was intense, and every noise made her jump. Were there snakes? Scorpions? She didn't even want to think about it. In the morning, she woke up with her whole body aching and a terrible thirst. That's when she realized she had no water, absolutely nothing. She looked around and saw, at a considerable distance, what looked like a well. When she got there, she almost gave up on everything. The water was dirty, with slime on the edges, and smelled bad. "You can't drink this," she murmured to herself, but she needed water to at least wash up. She grabbed an old bucket she found near the well and pulled up the water with a rope that seemed 100 years old. Every movement was a struggle, and she wasn't used to heavy physical labor. As she washed her face with that cold, murky water, she thought of her friends in the town. What would they be doing now? Probably going to work, complaining about traffic, having coffee at some coffee shop. Normal things. Things that now seemed like a distant luxury. She spent the next 3 days trying to clean the house. Every corner revealed more destruction, more filth, more evidence that this place had been abandoned for many years. Her hands became covered in blisters, her clothes tore in several places, and she began to develop a cough from the dust. On the 4th day, the cousin returned. This time, he wasn't alone. "Sarah, this is Mr. Bennett. He's a lawyer." The man was older, wore a suit despite the absurd heat, and carried a brown leather briefcase. "Miss Miller, I've come here to clarify an important matter. It turns out there are documents that prove a significant portion of this land belongs to Mr. Ryan here, by family right. The division of the inheritance was not done correctly." What do you mean? Sarah felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. The will left everything to me. Yes, but there are matters predating the will, old documents that establish rights which cannot be ignored. I suggest you seek legal counsel. For now, I'll leave a copy of the papers for your review. Sarah took the documents with trembling hands. Everything was written in legal language she barely understood. Stamps, signatures, old dates. It could be true, or it could be a lie. She had no way of knowing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. After they left, Sarah sat on the floor and tried to process what was happening. She had no money to hire a lawyer. She barely had money to eat. Her savings were gone and she had sold everything before coming. She had bet everything on this inheritance, believing it would be her salvation. And now it seemed even that was going to be taken from her. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice another person approaching until she heard a shrill voice. "You have the nerve to show up here!" A short, plump lady with white hair pointed her finger at Sarah with fury in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I don't understand. Who are you?" "Don't play dumb. Your grandfather owed money to my family, a lot of money, and now you're going to pay." "My grandfather? But I barely knew him. I don't know anything about any debts." "Well, you should know, $600. He borrowed it and never paid it back, and now I want it back with interest." "I don't have that money. I don't have any money." "Then sell this worthless piece of land and pay me." The woman stomped away, leaving Sarah even more desperate. Debts she didn't know existed. Cousins appearing out of nowhere with documents, and her there alone, not knowing what to do. That night, she began to search the house more systematically. If she was going to lose everything anyway, at least she wanted to understand what had happened. Who was this grandfather she never knew? Why did he leave everything to her and not to the rest of the family? While rummaging through a pile of rotten wood in what must have once been the living room, she felt something different under her feet. The floorboards sounded hollow in one specific spot. Using a plank as a lever, she managed to lift a few floorboards. Underneath, wrapped in old, torn plastic, was a wooden box. Her heart raced. With trembling hands, she pulled the box out. It was heavy and had a small, rusty padlock that gave way with a strong tug. Inside there were letters, many letters, all yellowed with age, and documents, papers full of stamps, signatures, numbers she didn't understand. She began to read the letters, trying to decipher the old shaky handwriting. "My dear George, we can't go on like this. They know everything. We need to act before it's too late. George, the documents you kept are our only chance. Don't lose them. They are the proof of everything." Sarah Miller spent the whole night reading, trying to piece together the puzzle. Her grandfather had been partners with someone. There were mentions of land, of business, of something that had gone terribly wrong. But the details were vague, fragmented. By morning she was exhausted, but determined to understand more. She needed to show this to someone who could explain. Without thinking too much, she put the documents in an old bag and went to the town to look for her cousin. Perhaps it was naivety, perhaps desperation. But when she showed the papers to Ryan, his reaction was immediate and violent. "Where did you find this?" he almost shouted, trying to snatch the bag from her hands. "It was in the house. They're my grandfather's documents. This isn't just yours. It belongs to the whole family. Give that to me." He pulled hard, tearing the bag. Papers fell to the floor. Sarah quickly bent down to gather them, but Ryan was faster in grabbing some. "You don't know what you're doing," he said, with an expression she had never seen. Fear. He was afraid. "Give those papers back and forget you ever saw anything." "Why? What's in these documents?" "Nothing that concerns you. Just sell that land to me and leave. It's better for you." But now Sarah was sure there was something important there. She gathered the papers she could and ran off, leaving Ryan shouting behind her. She returned to the farm and hid the documents in a different place, burying them inside an old can she found. Then she improvised a lock on the door using wire and wood. It wasn't much, but at least she would know if someone tried to get in. That night every noise made her wake up frightened. What if her cousin came to steal the documents? What if he brought other people? She was completely alone there, with no close neighbors, no working phone. When dawn came, she decided to go to the town to try to understand more about her grandfather. Someone must remember him. Someone must know something. The general store was small, with crowded shelves and a smell of aged cheese in the air. The owner, a woman of about 60, watched her with curiosity. "You're new around here." "I'm George Miller's granddaughter. I inherited his farm." The woman stopped what she was doing and looked at Sarah carefully. "Goodness, you look just like him when he was young, the same eyes." "You knew my grandfather?" "I did. Everyone here knew him. Your grandfather was very respected back in the day. But then that whole business happened and he disappeared. No one saw him around here anymore." "What business?" The woman looked around as if checking if anyone else was listening. "Look, I don't know the details. I was a child at the time. But my father used to say there was a big mess with land, documents, that sort of thing. Your grandfather got involved in something and had to leave. They said he knew things he shouldn't have known." "Do you know where I can find someone who remembers better? Someone who was his friend?" "There's Mr. Walter. He's almost 90, lives up the street there, the blue house. If anyone knows anything, it's him." Sarah thanked her and went to look for the house. She found a very elderly man sitting on the porch with wrinkled skin and eyes half closed. "Mr. Walter?" He took a while to react, but when he saw Sarah, his eyes widened. "George?" he murmured. "No, sir. I'm Sarah, his granddaughter." "Ah, the granddaughter. He talked about you, you know. Said that one day you'd come back here. You were friends with my grandfather." "I was. Great friends. Until the day everything fell apart." "What happened?" The old man sighed deeply. "Your grandfather and another man, Frank, were partners. They had a small company that dealt in land. Honest work, they helped families get their documents in order, things like that. But then a group of men from the state capital showed up. They offered a lot of money for your grandfather and Frank to sign some papers. They didn't really understand what they were signing. They trusted them. It was the biggest mistake." "What was in those papers?" "Transfer of ownership for several plots of land in the region. But they weren't their lands, they belonged to other families. The documents were fake, but with your grandfather's and Frank's signatures, they looked legitimate. By the time they discovered the scam, it was too late. Several families lost their land." "And my grandfather?" "He was devastated. He tried to prove he'd been tricked, but no one believed him. They said he was an accomplice. Frank disappeared, no one ever saw him again. And your grandfather left soon after, but before he did, he told me something." The old man paused, as if reliving painful memories. "He said he had kept copies of all the real documents, that one day he would prove the truth, but he never came back." Sarah felt a chill. The documents she had found. Could those be them? "Walter, do you know who those men from the capital were, the ones who pulled the scam?" "I don't remember all the names, but I know they were important people, and that after that scam, they became the owners of a lot of land around here, land that's worth a lot of money nowadays." When she returned to the farm, Sarah's head was spinning. Everything was starting to make sense. The cousin wanting to buy the land for nothing, the hidden documents, the fear she saw in his eyes. But before she could process it all, she saw movement on the property. There were people there. 3 men she didn't know, all wearing work clothes and carrying equipment. "What are you doing here?" One of them, the tallest, answered without looking at her. "We work for Mr. Ryan. He told us to fence off the land." "Fence it off? How? This is mine." "We just follow orders, miss. He said he has a claim to the land and told us to secure it." "Secure it from who?" "From me. Look, we don't want any trouble. We're just working here." Sarah tried to argue, but it was useless. They were being paid and weren't going to stop. She watched, helpless, as they began installing a rudimentary fence around the property. She ran to the place where she had hidden the documents. They were still there, thank heavens. She took everything and hid it inside her own clothes, then went to the town again, this time looking for the registry office. "I need certified copies of these documents," she said to the clerk. The woman looked at the papers carefully. These documents are very old. I'll need the notary to see them before I can certify anything. Half an hour later, the notary, a middle-aged man with thick glasses, called Sarah into his office. "Where did you get these documents?" "They were my grandfather's. I inherited the farm from him and found them hidden." "Do you know what these papers are?" "More or less. I know they have to do with land." The notary took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I can't certify this. I can't, and I won't." "Why?" "Because these documents could cause a lot of problems for a lot of important people. My advice is that you forget you ever saw this and get on with your life. But they're legal documents. They were stored away. Maybe they are. Maybe they aren't. It's not my responsibility to verify." "I'm sorry, but I can't help." Sarah left the registry office feeling defeated. No one wanted to help. Everyone was either afraid or involved somehow. She was walking back to the farm, as it was getting dark, when a car stopped beside her. It was an old pickup truck, and the driver was a man about 60 with graying hair and calloused hands. "You're George's granddaughter, right?" Sarah took a step back, suspicious. "Who wants to know?" "Easy, girl. I worked for your grandfather. My name is Sam. When I heard you had arrived, I kept thinking whether I should come talk to you or not." "What do you want?" "I want to help. I saw what Ryan is doing to you. It's not right." "And why do you want to help?" "Because I owed your grandfather. He gave me work when no one else would, treated me with dignity, and because I know he wasn't a crook, no matter what everyone says." Sarah looked into the man's eyes and saw sincerity there. "What do you know about the documents?" "I know your grandfather hid something important at the farm. He told me just before he left, said it was proof he was innocent, but he never told me where it was. I found it. I found documents. Lots of documents." Sam nodded slowly. "So that's why Ryan is desperate. He must have found out through the old rumors. Can you help me understand what to do with this?" "I can try. But first you need a safe place to stay. It's not safe for you to sleep at that farm alone now. I don't have money for a hotel. My sister has a little room at the back of her house. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe. You can stay there while we sort this out." Sarah didn't have many options. She accepted the offer. Sam's sister, Mrs. Eleanor, was a kind lady in her mid-50s. She prepared a plate of hot food for Sarah, who hadn't eaten a decent meal in days. "Eat, child. You're much too thin." While she ate, Sarah told the whole story to Sam and Eleanor. She showed some of the documents she had brought with her. Sam examined everything carefully. "This here is dynamite. If it's true, it proves there was fraud in dozens of land transfers. Whole families lost their properties. But what do I do with it? No one wants to help me. The notary refused to authenticate it." "That's because everyone is afraid. The people who ended up with that land are powerful now, built fortunes on what they stole. So there's no way. I didn't say that, but it's going to take more than will. It's going to take courage and a lawyer who isn't afraid to take on big people." "Do you know anyone like that?" Sam thought for a moment. "Maybe. There's a lawyer in the neighboring city, Mr. James. He's known for taking on tough cases no one else wants. But it'll cost a lot." "I don't have any money. Some lawyers work for a percentage. If you win the case, he gets a share. If you lose, he gets nothing." It was a light at the end of the tunnel, however small. The next day, Sam took Sarah to the neighboring city. Mr. James's office was simple, in an old building downtown. The secretary received them with some coldness, but when Sam explained it was about land fraud documents, she had them wait. Mr. James was younger than Sarah expected, maybe around 40, with a tired air but attentive eyes. He listened to the whole story without interrupting, examining the documents Sarah brought. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. "Do you understand the gravity of what you're showing me?" he finally said. "I think so." "If these documents are authentic, and I believe they are, this could rewrite the land ownership history of this entire region. We're talking about dozens of families who lost everything unjustly." "So you can help me?" "I can, but I need to be honest with you. This will be a war. The people involved will do anything to stop it. They will threaten you, try to buy you off, try to destroy you." I have nothing left to lose. We all have something to lose, Sarah. But I understand your point. I'll take the case, but on one condition. I get 20% of everything that's recovered, and you need to promise me you won't give up no matter what happens. I promise. Then let's begin. But first I need all the documents, every single one. And we need a safe place to keep them. Sarah hesitated, trusting someone she had just met with something so important went against all her instincts. But what else could she do? There are more documents hidden at the farm, many more. Then let's go get them. Today. They returned to the area, but when they got near the farm, they saw the situation had worsened. Now there was a fully installed barbed wire fence, and 2 men were standing guard at the gate. "We're not going to be able to get in," Sarah said, desperate. Dr. James observed the situation. "Yes, we are. This is your property, established by the will. They have no legal right to keep you out. I'll call the police station." "No," Sarah grabbed his arm. "Please, no police. My grandfather always had problems with the authorities because of the whole story. I don't trust them. Sarah, sometimes we need the law on our side." "Please. There has to be another way," Sam interjected. "I know these guards. They work for whoever pays more. Let me try to talk to them." He got out of the car and went to the gate. Sarah couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw Sam gesturing and the guards shaking their heads no. After about 15 minutes, Sam came back. "They won't let anyone in. Ryan paid them well and said to keep everyone out until the court decision." "Court decision?" Sarah felt panic rising. "He filed a lawsuit contesting the will. He got a temporary injunction alleging irregularities. You have 15 days to prove you're the legitimate heir, or you lose everything." Dr. James hit his hand on the steering wheel. "That bastard is fast, I have to admit. But we can reverse this. Sarah, do you have a copy of the original will?" "I do. The lawyer who contacted me left a copy with me." "Great. We'll request the injunction be lifted and file a lawsuit for trespassing. But first, we need those hidden documents. They're buried, only I know where. Then we'll have to go in at night. We have no choice." The idea of breaking into her own property seemed absurd, but it was the only option. They waited for complete darkness. Sam knew the area and knew of a spot where the fence was less guarded. "Over there," he pointed to an area of denser woods. "We can get through without the guards seeing, but we'll have to go on foot, and it's a long way." They began their walk through the darkness. Sarah stumbled constantly, unaccustomed to walking on uneven ground in the dark. Dr. James wasn't in much better shape. Sam, used to the countryside, went ahead, clearing the path. It took them over an hour to reach the spot where Sarah had buried the tin with the documents. She dug with her own hands, desperate, until she felt the cold metal. "I found it. Quick, let's get out of here before anyone notices." But as they were heading back, they heard voices. The guards, probably making their rounds. "Get down," Sam whispered. They crouched in the darkness, barely breathing, as flashlight beams passed nearby. Sarah clutched the tin to her chest, praying they wouldn't be discovered. After minutes that felt like hours, the voices faded away. They continued their escape, now even more hurried. When they finally reached the car, they were all dirty, scratched, and exhausted. "Never again," Dr. James panted. "Never again will I do something like that." But he was smiling, and Sarah realized that despite the fear, there was something thrilling about fighting for what was hers. Back at the lawyer's office, they spread all the documents out on a large table. There were hundreds of papers, old deeds, contracts, letters, notes. Dr. James began examining everything methodically, taking notes, sorting by type and date. "This is gold, Sarah. Your grandfather documented absolutely everything. There are even notes from him explaining how he was deceived, with dates, names, details. So can it be proven that he was innocent? More than that. It can be proven who the real culprits were. And look at this here." He picked up a specific document. "This is an original deed to a property that today belongs to the Harrison family. They own half of the arable land in the region, but according to this document, the land belonged to the Smith family who were evicted 40 years ago. Do the Smiths still exist? I'll look into it. If there are descendants, they have the right to claim the property back. Dear listener, If you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Sarah spent the next few days in Dr. James's office, helping to catalogue all the documents. Sam would often appear with news from the countryside, and the news wasn't good. "Ryan is spreading that you're an opportunist trying to steal the family inheritance," he reported. "A lot of people are believing it. But I am the legitimate heir." "I know, but he's smooth-talking and well-connected. He's running a smear campaign against you." Dr. James barely looked up from the papers. "Let him talk. When we present all this in court, he'll have to shut his mouth." But the situation kept getting worse. Threats started to arrive. First, anonymous notes left at the office door. Then calls in the middle of the night. Text messages telling Sarah to give up while she still had a chance. "They're getting nervous," Dr. James said. "It's a good sign. It means they know we have something real." "A good sign?" Sarah was terrified. "They're threatening me. Threats only work if you let them. Are you going to give up?" "No." "Then ignore them. And if they get more aggressive, we'll document everything and add it to the charges." While the legal process slowly developed, Dr. James began investigating the descendants of the families who had lost their lands. He found several. The Smith family still existed, as did the Taylors, the Andersons, the Brookses. Many had left the region decades ago, but some still lived nearby in precarious situations. "I'll contact them," he said. "I'll explain they may have the right to recover their land." "But won't that reduce what I receive?" Dr. James looked at Sarah seriously. "It will. But it's the right thing to do. These families were harmed as much as your grandfather. Maybe more because they lost everything and didn't have the documents to prove it." Sarah thought of Mrs. Eleanor, who had taken her in, of Sam, who was risking his reputation to help her, of all the simple people who had been crushed by the powerful. "You're right. Let's bring them all into the case." That's how the case began to grow. From a simple inheritance dispute, it turned into a class action involving dozens of families and questioning the ownership of land worth millions. The reaction was immediate and fierce. The families controlling the land hired the best lawyers money could buy. They started appearing in the local press, giving interviews about how they were victims of an extortion attempt. "Look at this," Sam showed a newspaper to Sarah. "They're saying you and Dr. James are fabricating documents to make money." The article was cruel and full of insinuations. It said Sarah was a con artist who had appeared out of nowhere claiming to be related to a man who died years ago. That Dr. James was known for taking on shady cases. That it was all just an attempted scam. "That's a lie!" Sarah was furious. "I know, but many people will believe it. That's how the game works." Dr. James, however, seemed pleased. "Excellent. The more noise they make, the more attention the case will get. And attention is exactly what we need." He was right. With all the publicity, other lawyers started taking an interest in the case. Journalists from bigger cities showed up wanting to understand the story. And more importantly, more people started coming forward with stories of lost land, of families destroyed by the same group of businessmen who had pulled the scams decades ago. One night, when Sarah was in the little room at the back of Mrs. Eleanor's house, she heard knocks at the door. It was a woman of about 70, thin and bent, leaning on a cane. "Are you the young lady with the inheritance?" she asked. "I am. How can I help you? I heard about what you're doing, about the documents, about getting the land back. Is it true?" "It's true, yes, ma'am." The woman began to cry. "My family lost everything when I was a girl. My father never recovered. He died poor and bitter, believing it was his fault. But it wasn't. They were robbed, just like other families." "Do you want to join the lawsuit?" "I want justice. Even if it's too late for my father, I want his name cleared. I want everyone to know he wasn't a failure, he was a victim." Sarah hugged the woman, feeling the weight of all those stories. It wasn't just about inheritance or money. It was about dignity, it was about truth. Dr. James incorporated the woman's testimony into the case, along with others that came forward. The case was turning into something much bigger than anyone could have imagined. But the bigger it got, the more dangerous it became. The threats intensified. One day Sarah returned to the little room and found everything turned upside down. Someone had broken in and searched for something. Did they take anything? Mrs. Eleanor was terrified. No, the documents are all with Dr. James. There was nothing important here. This was a warning, girl. They're saying they can get to you whenever they want. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat on the bed, hugging her knees, trying to decide if she had the courage to continue. In the morning, she received an unexpected visit. It was a well-dressed man driving an expensive car. "Miss Sarah, my name is Albert Harrison." The last name made Sarah tense up. The Harrison family was one of the main ones involved in the case. "What do you want?" "To talk, just to talk. May I come in?" She looked at Mrs. Eleanor, who gestured that she was there if needed. "You can speak from right there." Albert sighed. "Very well. I came here to make an offer, a generous offer. $20,000 for you to drop everything and leave. No questions, no judgments. You take the money and forget this whole story." $20,000. It was more money than Sarah had ever seen in her life. She could start over somewhere else, far from all these complications. And the other families, the ones who lost their land, they're not your problem. You barely know these people. You're afraid, aren't you? Sarah felt a courage she didn't know she had. Afraid of what will happen when the truth comes out. It's not fear, it's common sense. You're one person against families established for generations. You don't stand a chance of winning. "Then why are you offering me money to quit?" Albert's face hardened. "It's your last chance. Refuse this offer and you'll regret it." "I refuse. You can leave." He left without another word, but Sarah could see the anger in his eyes. "You were very brave," Mrs. Eleanor said, "but also very foolish. $20,000, girl. It's not about the money, Mrs. Eleanor. It never was." In the following days, the pressure increased even more. Bigger offers came. 40,000, 60,000. Sarah refused them all. Then they changed tactics. They started going after the other families involved in the lawsuit, offering individual settlements. Some accepted, out of fear or need. Others held firm. "We're losing people," Dr. James said, worried. "If many accept settlements, the case loses strength. What do we do?" "We continue. With fewer people or with more, we continue." The preliminary hearing was scheduled. It was just the beginning of the process, but it would be the first time everything would be discussed officially in a courtroom. Sarah was nervous that day. She wore the best clothes she had, which weren't much, and went with Dr. James to the courthouse. The room was full. On one side, the lawyers for the accused families, all in impeccable suits and with an air of confidence. On the other, Dr. James, Sarah, and the representatives of the few families still in the case. The judge was a man of about 60, with a tired expression and the air of someone who had seen it all. "Let's begin, Dr. James. Present your case." The lawyer stood up and, in a clear and methodical way, explained the entire history. He spoke about George, about the scam applied decades ago, about the documents that proved everything. He presented certified copies of deeds, contracts, letters. The other side's lawyers counterattacked, claiming the documents were fake, that the statute of limitations had passed, that there was no way to prove authenticity after so long. It was a technical and legal battle that lasted hours. Sarah barely understood half of what was being discussed, but she could see by Dr. James's expression that things were not going well. In the end, the judge decided, "I will need more time to analyze all the documentation presented. I will appoint an expert to verify the authenticity of the documents. Until then, the injunction preventing Miss Sarah from accessing the property remains in effect. Next hearing in 60 days. 60 days, 2 months to find out if she had any chance. Leaving the courthouse, Sarah felt drained. "Did it go well?" she asked Dr. James. "Better than I expected. The judge didn't dismiss anything outright. That's a good sign." "It didn't seem like a good sign. Trust me, in cases like these, the fact he didn't reject our petition outright is already a victory." But the wait would be long and difficult. During this time, Sarah's life fell into a strange routine. She helped Mrs. Eleanor with the house in exchange for lodging and spent her afternoons at Dr. James's office, organizing documents and helping with research. Sam appeared regularly with news, some good, some bad. "The expert appointed by the judge is serious," he said one day. "It won't be easy to bribe him." "That's good for you." "And Ryan?" "He's quiet. Too quiet. That worries me." Sam's worry proved justified. A week later, a bombshell report appeared in the press. They had discovered that Sarah had a criminal record in another state. "But that's a lie," she screamed upon reading the news. "I've never been arrested. I've never done anything." "I know," Dr. James was pale. "They falsified records, and well done, I might add. But how do we prove it's a lie? We'll have to file a lawsuit for defamation and falsification of records, and hope the judge sees through this smokescreen." It was a terrible period. Sarah couldn't go out on the street without receiving suspicious looks. The people who had started to support her drifted away. Even Mrs. Eleanor seemed less warm. "I swear it's a lie," Sarah said to her, with tears in her eyes. "I believe you, girl, but you need to understand that people are afraid of getting involved with trouble." The loneliness was crushing. Sarah began to question if it was worth continuing. Maybe she should have accepted the money. Maybe she should have left when she still had a chance. It was Sam who brought her back. "You're thinking of giving up, aren't you?" he said bluntly. "How do you know?" "I see it in your eyes. Same expression your grandfather had before he left." "And what if he was right? What if the fight isn't worth it?" "Your grandfather spent the rest of his life with remorse. He died without making peace with what had happened. Do you want to live like that?" "No." "Then lift your head and keep fighting." The conversation with Sam rekindled something in Sarah. She returned to work with renewed determination. The expert appointed by the judge finally gave his verdict. The documents were authentic. They were, in fact, original deeds and contracts from the period, with all signatures and stamps verified. "We won!" Dr. James was euphoric. "With the expert's report, the case changes completely." But the victory was brief. The defense filed appeal after appeal, alleging technical flaws, questioning the expert's impartiality, asking for new postponements. "They are trying to drag out the process," Dr. James explained. "The longer it takes, the more expensive it gets for us, and the more likely we are to give up." But we are not going to give up. No, but they don't know that. While the lawsuit dragged on in the courts, something unexpected happened. A journalist from a major newspaper in the state capital appeared, interested in the story. She had heard about the case and wanted to do an investigative report. "This could be great or terrible," Dr. James said. "It depends on how she approaches it." Sarah agreed to give an interview. The journalist, named Rachel, was a woman of about 50, with attentive eyes and a recorder always on. "Tell me everything from the beginning," she said. Sarah told her. From the manila envelope with the news of the inheritance to the threats and the fake documents about criminal records. Rachel listened attentively, asking precise questions. "Do you have proof of what you're saying?" "I do. Documents, photos, everything." "And are you willing to make all of that available for verification?" "I am." The report came out 2 weeks later. It occupied the front page and 3 internal pages. Rachel had done a thorough job, investigating not only Sarah's case, but the entire history of the lands in the region over the last decades. The impact was immediate. Other newspapers picked up the story. Radio programs began to discuss it. Even a TV station from the capital sent a crew to cover it. Suddenly, Sarah was no longer alone. Public opinion began to change. People on the street stopped to express support. Donations began to arrive to help with the legal costs. But along with the support came more danger. The threats became more direct, more violent. "You need protection," Dr. James said. "This is getting too dangerous." "Protection, how so?" "Security guards, at least someone to keep an eye on you." "I don't have money for that. I'll hire them, and I'll deduct it later when we win." Sarah didn't want to admit it, but she was afraid. She accepted. The security guard was a former military man of about 40, tall and serious. He didn't talk much, but his presence was comforting. The second hearing arrived. This time, the courtroom was even more crowded. Journalists, onlookers, members of the families involved. It was as if the entire region had stopped to watch the unfolding events. The judge looked tired. "Before we begin, I have an announcement to make. Due to the complexity of this case and the public repercussion, I have requested a transfer to a specialized court. This case will be tried in the state capital by a tribunal with more resources to handle the magnitude of the accusations. There were murmurs in the room. Dr. James smiled discreetly. The change of jurisdiction was good for them. The defense lawyers, however, looked displeased. It took another 3 months for the case to be transferred and reorganized in the capital. During that time, Sarah lived in a state of constant tension. Each day brought a new twist, a new threat, a new hope. Sam continued to be her link to the countryside, bringing news and support. "People are starting to believe in you," he said, "especially after that report. Many people who were afraid to speak up are coming forward with stories about the lands. Is that good? It's great. The more testimonies, the stronger our case." But not all was good news. Ryan continued his smear campaign, now with more resources. He had gained some allies among the powerful families, and together they spread rumors and lies. "Let him talk," Dr. James repeated. "Every lie he spreads, the more credibility he loses." Finally, the first hearing in the state capital was scheduled. It was in a large and imposing courthouse, very different from the small courthouse in the region. Sarah felt small entering that enormous building, but by her side were Dr. James, Sam, Mrs. Eleanor, and several other people who had decided to support her. The judge in the capital was a woman, Dr. Margaret, known for being strict but fair. "Let's get to the point," she said, as soon as everyone was settled. "I've read the entire case file, I've read the expert report, I've read the rebuttals. This is an extraordinary case, and I intend to treat it with all the seriousness it deserves." The hearing lasted the entire day. Witnesses were called, evidence was presented, interrogations were conducted. Sarah had to take the witness stand and tell her version under oath. "You claim you legitimately inherited the property from your grandfather." The defense attorney attacked her. "But there are records showing you barely knew this grandfather. How can you be sure he really wanted to leave everything to you?" "I can't be sure of what he wanted," Sarah answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "But he left a will registered at the registry office, and in that will he left everything to me. I didn't ask for this. I didn't expect this. But when I received it, I decided to honor his memory by doing the right thing." "The right thing? You call it right to question the property of established families, cause social upheaval, destroy reputations?" "I call it right to seek the truth. My grandfather spent decades carrying the weight of something he didn't do. Those families you say I'm harming, they built fortunes on stolen lands. The real injustice was what they did 40 years ago. The attorney tried to unsettle her with more questions, but Sarah remained firm. All the anger, all the frustration, all the suffering she had been through came out in her answers. When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, she was trembling. Mrs. Eleanor hugged her. "You did very well, girl, very well." The judge set a new date for the verdict. 6 more weeks of waiting. During that time, something surprising happened. Cracks began to appear in the group opposing Sarah. Some of the families, seeing the strength of the evidence and the direction the case was taking, began to distance themselves from the others. One of them, the Anderson family, even offered a settlement to return lands they had acquired illegally in exchange for not facing criminal charges. "This is huge," Dr. James said. "If one family is willing to settle, others will follow. The castle is crumbling." And it truly was. In the following days, 2 more families came forward to negotiate. Only the Harrison family and a few close allies continued to resist. Albert Harrison made one last attempt to buy Sarah's silence. He offered $100,000 and the return of the farm. "No," she said without a second thought. "You are a fool." He spat the words. "You could be rich right now. I don't want wealth built on lies." The verdict finally arrived. Sarah was so nervous she could barely stand still. The courtroom was full again with even more journalists and onlookers. Judge Margaret entered and everyone stood up. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and began to read. After thorough analysis of all the evidence and testimonies presented, this court has reached the following conclusions. Sarah Miller held Mrs. Eleanor's hand tightly. First, it is established that the will left by George Miller in favor of his granddaughter Sarah Miller is legitimate and valid. All challenges are rejected. Sarah let out a sigh of relief. Second, the documents presented by Miss Sarah are authentic and prove significant fraud in the property transfers carried out approximately 40 years ago. There was murmuring in the room. Third, I order the opening of full investigations into all land transfers carried out in the period in question in the region. Families who acquired land fraudulently have 60 days to present a defense or reach an agreement with the legitimate owners. The room erupted in reactions. Some celebrated, others protested. The defense lawyers stood up indignantly, announcing they would appeal. But Sarah barely heard. She had won. Not just the inheritance, but the possibility of justice for so many people. The judge banged the gavel, calling for order. Furthermore, I order that Miss Sarah Miller be immediately reinstated into possession of her property, with the right to compensation for damages caused during the period of illegal interdiction. When they left the courthouse, Sarah was met with applause. People she had never seen came to greet her, thank her, offer help. Sam had tears in his eyes. Your grandfather would be proud. But the fight was not over. As expected, there were appeals, attempts to overturn the decision, political pressures. However, the strength of the evidence and public support were too great. One by one, the appeals were denied, and the families, seeing they could no longer sustain the lies, began to give in. Agreements were made, lands were returned, compensations were paid. The whole process took another year, but in the end, dozens of families recovered what was rightfully theirs. Sarah, as she had led the entire movement and provided the crucial evidence, received not only the farm but a significant percentage of the compensations. Suddenly, she who had nothing had ample resources. The first thing she did was return to the farm. Sam and several other people from the community went with her. This time there were no guards at the gate, no fences blocking the entrance. The place was even more run down after all the time abandoned. But now there was hope. We will rebuild, she said. Not just the house, but everything. Let's make this place a symbol that justice still exists. And that's what they did. With the resources she had, Sarah hired local workers, people from the very community that had been helped by the process. Together they began to restore the farm. The house was rebuilt, more beautiful than ever. A piped water system was installed. Electricity arrived. The land was treated and planted. But Sarah did not stop there. She created a community center at the farm, where families benefited by the process could gather, exchange experiences, help each other. Her grandfather's former employee, Sam, ended up becoming the farm's manager. He knew the land and had Sarah's trust. One day, Sam arrived with a strange expression. Remember I said your grandfather had hidden a letter? I remember. I found it. It was inside the old Bible that was in the house. The Bible survived everything, and the letter was there. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the envelope yellowed with time. My dear granddaughter, if you are reading this, it means you had courage where I did not. It means you did what was right, even when it was difficult. I spent 40 years running from the truth, living with the shame of something I did not do, but did not have the strength to fight. I leave these documents for you, not as a material inheritance, but as a request. Do justice. Not for the lands, not for the money, but for the people who were harmed. You never knew me, and for that I apologize. I was a coward. But I chose you as my heir because I saw your mother raise a strong, honest woman, capable of doing what I could not. No matter how long it takes, no matter how difficult it is, seek the truth. It is the only inheritance truly worth leaving. With love and regret, your grandfather George. Sarah cried as she read. She cried for all the struggles, for all the hardships, but also with relief. She had fulfilled his request. She had honored his memory. In the following months, the farm transformed completely. It became a prosperous place, full of life. But more than that, it became a symbol of hope for the entire region. The families who recovered their lands began to prosper. Some created agricultural cooperatives, others invested in small businesses. The community, once divided and bitter, began to heal. Sarah looked at all of this and could hardly believe it. Months ago, she was desperate, alone, without money and without hope. Now she was surrounded by friends, with resources, and most importantly, with purpose. Ryan, the cousin who had tried so hard to harm her, was exposed as an accomplice to the old frauds. He lost all credibility in the region and ended up moving away. Sarah felt no satisfaction from this, only sadness. Sadness that someone had let themselves be corrupted by greed. Mrs. Eleanor became her best friend. They spent hours talking, planning improvements for the community, caring for people in need. Dr. James, who had taken the case when no one else would, received his percentage and used part of the money to open a larger office, focused on helping people in unjust situations. "You taught me something important," he said to Sarah, "that some cases aren't about money. They're about doing what's right." Sam became almost like a father to Sarah. He taught her about the land, about the community, about life in the countryside. One day, almost 2 years after everything had begun, Sarah was on the porch of the rebuilt house, drinking coffee and watching the sun rise over the lands that were now truly hers, when she had a profound reflection. She had come to that place thinking she would find an inheritance that would solve her financial problems. Instead, she found something far more valuable: a purpose, a community, a reason to fight. The lands weren't just hers. They belonged to everyone who had been wronged. And she was merely the guardian, the person who had had the courage to fight when others could not. The farm became a gathering point for the entire region. On weekends, families came for community events. Children played where before there were only ruins. Where there was abandonment, now there was life. Sarah never forgot how she had arrived there, alone, scared, with nothing. That memory kept her humble and grateful. Whenever someone came to the farm needing help, she remembered when she was in that position. She created an assistance program for families in difficulty, offering work on the farm, teaching about sustainable agriculture, legal support when needed. Everything she wished she had had when she arrived. Her story began to inspire other people. Journalists from across the country came to do reports. Legal scholars used the case as an example of belated justice. She received letters from people in similar situations asking for advice. "You've become a symbol," Dr. James said, half joking, half serious. "I don't want to be a symbol. I just want to live in peace." Too late. When you decided to fight, you became an example. But life wasn't only about the past and the fight. Sarah began to build a future, too. She met a man from the region, a country school teacher who admired what she was doing. They began to see each other, slowly, without rush. "You are amazing," he said one day. "I don't know if I would have had your courage." It wasn't courage, it was desperation that turned into determination. Call it what you will. It's admirable. The relationship grew naturally, without pressure. He helped her with the educational projects at the farm, teaching the children in the community. She helped at his school with resources and materials. 3 years after the day she had first arrived at the farm, Sarah organized a big party. She invited all the families who had been helped by the process, all the lawyers, journalists, supporters. "Today marks 3 years since I arrived here," she said, before hundreds of people. "I arrived with nothing, expecting nothing, and I found everything. Not just land or money, but a community, a purpose, a family." She looked at Sam, at Mrs. Eleanor, at Dr. James, at all the people who had fought by her side. "My grandfather left me an inheritance. But it wasn't the farm. It was the opportunity to correct a mistake, to do justice, to build something bigger than myself, and I hope I have honored that inheritance." The applause was long and emotional. When the party ended and people left, Sarah was alone on the porch, looking at the stars. She thought about everything she had been through, the nights sleeping in rubble, the hunger, the fear, the threats. But she also thought about the victories, the justice achieved, the lives changed. Every second of suffering was worth it. The farm was no longer an abandoned place. It was a home. It was a symbol. It was proof that sometimes the greatest riches don't come in the form of money, but of dignity regained and justice finally achieved. And Sarah, the woman who had arrived with nothing, now had everything that truly mattered: peace, purpose, and the certainty that she had done the right thing. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we are just starting out, now continuing. The years that followed brought even more transformations. Sarah's farm became a reference throughout the region as an example of sustainable agriculture and community development. But it wasn't a path without challenges. One day, almost 5 years after everything had begun, Sarah received news that shook her to her core. One of the families that had recovered land was being sued by a large company that claimed to have purchased the property in good faith before the investigations. This could set a precedent for others to contest the returns, Dr. James explained, worried. But how? The courts have already decided. Yes, but this company is arguing it wasn't part of the original proceedings and that it has rights as a third party in good faith. It was the Smith family, that elderly lady who had cried when talking about her father. Now she risked losing everything again. Sarah didn't think twice. She used her own resources to hire the best lawyers to defend the Smith family. She mobilized the press, organized demonstrations, did everything in her power. "Why are you doing this?" Mrs. Smith asked, moved. "You've already done so much for us." "Because the fight never ends. There will always be someone trying to take advantage. But as long as I have strength, I will fight." The Smith family case dragged on for months. The company had immense resources and lawyers specialized in finding loopholes in the law. But Sarah and Dr. James had something money couldn't buy: the truth and the support of the community. They organized a campaign that went viral on social media. People from all over the country sent messages of support, made donations to the legal fund, shared the story. The public pressure was so great that the company ended up dropping the lawsuit, preferring to avoid the damage to its image. It was an important victory, but Sarah knew other challenges would come, and they did. A year later, it was time to face a severe drought crisis that hit the entire region. The crops died, the wells dried up, and despair began to take hold. Sarah gathered all the small producers from the farm and the neighboring properties. "We have to unite. Alone, we'll go broke. Together, we can survive." They created a resource-sharing system. Whoever had a deeper well shared water. Whoever had equipment lent it. Whoever had knowledge taught conservation techniques. It was difficult. There were arguments, disagreements, moments when it seemed everything would fall apart. But the community Sarah had helped build remained strong. When the drought finally passed, they had not only survived, but emerged stronger. The cooperation system they created during the crisis became permanent, giving rise to an official agricultural cooperative. Sam, now nearly 70, would always say, "Your grandfather planted a seed when he saved those documents. You watered that seed with your courage, and now we are harvesting the fruits." But not everything was work and struggle. Sarah found time to live too. Her relationship with the teacher, Michael, deepened. They married in a simple ceremony at the farm, with the entire community present. "Are you sure you want to marry me?" Michael had asked, half joking. "Life with me won't be easy. I'm married to this farm and this community." "That's exactly why I want to marry you." Together, they expanded the educational projects. They built a small school at the farm for the children of the region. Michael taught in the mornings, and in the afternoons the children learned about agriculture, sustainability, and the history of the region. "It's important they know where they came from," Sarah would explain, "that they know the struggle of their parents and grandparents. That way, they'll value what they have." Mrs. Eleanor, now over 70, remained a constant presence. She had a practical wisdom Sarah always sought. "Child, you're doing too much," she'd say, when she saw Sarah working from sunup to sundown. "You need to rest too." "How can I rest when there's so much to do?" "It's that you haven't understood yet. The struggle has no end. There will always be something to do, someone to help, a problem to solve. If you don't learn to rest, you'll burn out." Sarah began to understand this better when, at 35, she discovered she was pregnant. The pregnancy forced her to slow down, to delegate more, to trust that the community she had helped build could sustain itself without her being present for every decision. It was a hard lesson for someone used to controlling everything, but a necessary one. The son was born on a spring morning. It was a boy, and she named him George Jr. after his grandfather. He will grow up hearing stories about his great-grandfather, Sarah said, holding the baby for the first time. He will know that mistakes can be corrected, that the truth always finds a way, that it's worth fighting for. Sam came to visit at the hospital, bringing flowers from the farm. "Your grandfather would be so happy," he said, his eyes moist. "To see all this, to see you, to see his name cleared, to see his struggle wasn't in vain." Motherhood changed Sarah. It didn't diminish her determination or her commitment to the community, but it added a new dimension. Now she wasn't just building the present, she was preparing the future. She began to document everything. She wrote the complete story of what had happened, from the day she received the news of the inheritance to the present. She kept copies of all the important documents. She recorded testimonies from Sam, from Mrs. Eleanor, from the families who had been helped. "What's all this for?" Michael asked. "So it's never forgotten, so that if 50 years from now someone tries to rewrite history, there will be proof of what really happened." Dr. James, who had become a close friend as well as a lawyer, used the case to write a book about justice and perseverance. The book became study material in law schools. "You inspired an entire generation of lawyers," he said to Sarah at the book launch. "It wasn't me. It was the truth. I was just lucky enough to be the instrument." But life, as always, kept bringing surprises. When little George Jr. was 3 years old, a man Sarah had never seen before appeared at the farm. He was older, perhaps around 70, and had a nervous expression. "My name is Frank Carter," he said. "I was your grandfather's partner." Sarah felt as if time had stopped. Frank, the man who had disappeared after the coup, the man everyone thought was dead or had fled the country. "Come in," she managed to say, still in shock. Sitting on the porch, Frank told his story. After the coup, he had fled, afraid of being arrested. He changed his name, lived in hiding in other regions of the country. Only recently had he discovered, through news about the case, that Sarah had proven George's innocence. "I spent 40 years running, living with guilt and shame," he said, with tears in his eyes. "I thought I was an accomplice, that I had done something wrong, but I hadn't. We were deceived, both me and George. Why did you come back? Because I'm old. Because I want to make peace with the past before I go. And because I wanted to thank you for doing what neither I nor your grandfather had the courage to do." Sarah felt a mix of emotions: anger that he had run away, understanding for the fear he must have felt, sadness for all the wasted lives. "What do you want now?" "Nothing. I just wanted to see the place with my own eyes, to see that it all wasn't in vain, and to ask for forgiveness, even if I don't deserve it." They talked for hours. Frank told details of the coup that not even the documents revealed, names of people involved that had never been exposed. He had kept it all in his memory for decades. "Do you want to do something with this information?" Sarah asked. "I don't know if I have the strength for another battle, but I do." With Frank's new testimonies, Sarah and Dr. James reopened investigations into some of those involved who had never been held accountable. It wasn't about revenge, but about completing the circle of justice. Frank ended up staying in the region. Sarah helped him settle into a simple little house near the farm. He spent his final years finally at peace, seeing the result of what one young woman's courage had achieved where 2 men had failed. When Frank passed away 3 years later, he left everything he had to Sarah. It wasn't much in material terms, but it included documents and photos that completed the story. Sarah organized a memorial at the farm, not just for Frank and her grandfather, but for all the people who had been harmed by the coup. There were dozens of names, dozens of stories of families destroyed. "They will not be forgotten," she said at the memorial's unveiling. "This stone will remain here as a reminder that injustices can be corrected even if it takes decades, and as a warning that we must never allow something like this to happen again." The farm continued to grow. The agricultural cooperative prospered. The school had a waiting list. The social programs helped hundreds of families, and Sarah, now a mother of 2, a girl was born 2 years after George Jr., divided her time between her family and community work. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had accepted that $1,000 Ryan offered me on the first day," she commented one day to Michael. "You wouldn't have what you have today." Exactly. And I'm not talking about money or land. I'm talking about purpose, about knowing I made a difference in people's lives, about having built something bigger than myself. Sam, who was growing increasingly frail with age, came to live at the farm. Sarah Miller built a special little house for him, where he spent his days telling stories to the children from the country school about the old days, about George Miller, about how the region used to be. "You know you'll have to keep this going when I'm gone, right?" he said to Sarah one day. "Don't talk like that. I have to talk about it. I'm almost 80. I've lived much longer than I expected. But before I go, I need to be sure you'll continue the fight." "I'll always continue it." "And will you teach your children to continue it too?" "I will." Sam passed away in his sleep on a quiet summer night. The funeral was immense, with people from all over the region coming to pay their respects. He had become a father figure to Sarah and an honorary grandfather to her children. Sarah cried as she hadn't cried since her own mother's death years before. But along with the sadness, there was gratitude. Sam had lived to see the victory, to see justice done, to see the farm prosper. Mrs. Eleanor, at 85, was still active, though slower. She became the grandmother the children had never had. "You changed my life," she said to Sarah. "I was just an old woman renting out a little room. Now I'm part of something important." "You were always important, Mrs. Eleanor. You just needed someone to see it." The years passed. Little George Jr. grew up hearing stories about his great-grandfather and about his mother's struggle. At 12, he asked, "Mum, do you think I'll have to fight like you fought?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I hope not. I hope the world is more just when you grow up. But if you need to fight, know that you have the strength of generations of fighters in you and that you'll never be alone." The cooperative that had started small was now one of the largest in the region. It directly employed over 100 people and indirectly benefited hundreds of families. Sarah had stepped back from daily management, passing it on to younger people and keeping only a consulting role. "You need to learn to let go," Michael would say. "Let others lead. It's hard. I built this with so much effort. And that's exactly why you need to trust that it will continue without you needing to control every detail." It was a difficult but necessary transition. Sarah realized she had spent so much time fighting, building, proving, that she had forgotten to simply live. She began to dedicate more time to her children, to travel with Michael, to read books that had nothing to do with agriculture or law, to discover hobbies. "You seem lighter," Mrs. Eleanor observed. "I feel lighter. I finally understood that I don't need to carry the world on my shoulders all the time." But still, the fight called to her from time to time. When she learned that a new company was trying to buy land in the region, using questionable tactics, she didn't hesitate to get involved. "I thought you had retired," Dr. James joked when she appeared in his office. "I retired from daily management, but I'll never retire from defending what's right." Together, they exposed the new fraud attempt before it could cause any damage. The experience accumulated over all those years meant they recognized the signs quickly. When Sarah turned 50, the community organized a huge surprise party. People came from every corner of the region, many she didn't even know personally, but who had been indirectly benefited by her work. "You changed this region," the mayor said in an emotional speech. "You didn't just recover land or build a prosperous farm. You changed people's mindset. You showed that it's possible to fight injustice and win." Sarah looked around. She saw the faces of people she had helped. She saw the children studying at the school she built. She saw the green, productive land where before there was only abandonment. Through Michael and his children, her family, through the grandfather's legacy, finally honored. "I didn't change anything alone," she said when called to speak. "Every person here contributed. Everyone who had the courage to believe in the truth, to fight for justice, to not give up when it got hard. This victory belongs to all of us." The applause was long. But Sarah wasn't thinking about the applause. She was thinking of that 25-year-old woman who had arrived at the farm for the first time, desperate and alone. If she could go back and talk to that young woman, what would she say? "It will be difficult. More difficult than you can imagine. You'll want to give up 1,000 times. You'll cry, you'll be afraid, you'll feel alone. But in the end, it will be worth every second of suffering. Because it's not about the money or the land, it's about becoming the person you were born to be. Mrs. Eleanor passed away at 90, surrounded by people she loved. Sarah held her hand until the end. "Thank you," Mrs. Eleanor whispered, "for letting me be a part of all this. Thank you for taking me in when I had nothing." Mrs. Eleanor's death marked the end of an era. She was the last of the people who had welcomed Sarah in those first difficult days. Sam had already passed. Dr. James was retired and in fragile health. It was time for a new generation to take over. George Jr., now 22, had studied law following in Dr. James's footsteps. He returned to the region with new ideas and renewed energy. "I want to continue the work you started, Mum, but in my own way. And I wouldn't expect any less." His sister, Mary, had chosen agronomy and was revolutionizing cultivation techniques at the cooperative. Together, the siblings formed a formidable duo. Sarah could finally rest, knowing the legacy was in good hands. At 60, Sarah wrote a book, not about the legal battles or the courtroom victories, but about the people, about Mrs. Eleanor and her kindness, about Sam and his loyalty, about the families who fought together, about the community that rose from the ashes. The book became an unexpected bestseller. People from all over the country wrote saying the story had inspired them to fight for their own causes. "You don't realize the impact you've had," Michael said, reading one of the letters. "This woman here says she was about to give up fighting an unjust labor cause, but she read your book and decided to continue, and she won. I didn't make her win, it was her own courage, but you lit the spark." When Sarah was 70, the farm was completely unrecognizable compared to that abandoned place from decades past. It was a thriving complex with productive farms, a renowned school, an active community center, and dozens of families living well. The memorial she had created became a visitation site. Schools brought students to learn about the region's history, about how one person's courage can make a difference. Sarah spent her days on the porch she loved so much, watching her grandchildren play, seeing the land prosper, seeing the grandfather's legacy finally complete. One day, one of the grandchildren, an 8-year-old girl named Eleanor, in honor of Mrs. Eleanor, asked, "Grandma, are you afraid of death?" "No, my dear, why?" "Because you're important. If you die, who will take care of all this?" Sarah smiled and stroked the girl's hair. "You know what I learned on this whole journey? That nothing really depends on just one person. When I arrived here, I thought I had to do everything alone. But I soon discovered that strength was in the community, in people helping each other, in truth being shared. But you fought. You made it happen. I took the first step, but it was hundreds of people who kept walking with me. And when I'm no longer here, you will continue, you, your siblings, your parents, and then your children, and their children. Is that what legacy is? Exactly. Legacy isn't about having your name on a plaque. It's about planting seeds that keep growing long after you're gone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The years that followed brought even more transformations. Sarah Miller's farm became a benchmark throughout the region as an example of sustainable agriculture and community development. But it wasn't a path without challenges. One day, almost 5 years after everything began, Sarah received news that shook her to her core. One of the families that had recovered their land was being sued by a large company that claimed to have purchased the property in good faith before the investigations. This could set a precedent for others to contest the restitutions, Dr. James explained, worried. But how? The court's already decided. Yes, but this company is arguing they weren't part of the original proceedings and that they have rights as good faith third parties. It was the Smith family, that elderly lady who had cried when speaking about her father. Now she risked losing everything again. Sarah didn't think twice. She used her own resources to hire the best lawyers to defend the Smith family. She mobilized the press, organized demonstrations, did everything in her power. "Why are you doing this?" Mrs. Smith asked, moved. "You've already done so much for us." "Because the fight never ends. There will always be someone trying to take advantage. But as long as I have strength, I will fight. The Smith family case dragged on for months. The company had immense resources and lawyers specialized in finding loopholes in the law. But Sarah and Dr. James had something money couldn't buy: the truth and the support of the community. They organized a campaign that went viral on social media. People from all over the country sent messages of support, made donations to the legal fund, shared the story. The public pressure was so great that the company ended up dropping the lawsuit, preferring to avoid the damage to their image. It was an important victory, but Sarah knew other challenges would come. And they did. A year later, it was time to face a severe drought crisis that hit the entire region. The crops died, the wells dried up, despair began to take hold. Sarah gathered all the small producers from the farm and the neighboring properties. "We have to unite. Alone, we will fail. Together, we can survive." They created a resource-sharing system. Whoever had a deeper well shared water. Whoever had equipment lent it out. Whoever had knowledge taught conservation techniques. It was difficult. There were arguments, disagreements, moments when it seemed everything would fall apart. But the community Sarah had helped build remained strong. One of the most tense moments was when they discovered someone was secretly taking water at night, more than their allotted share. Distrust began to spread. "I need to know who is doing this," Sarah said at a community meeting. "Not to punish, but to understand. Maybe the person needs more help than we imagine." It was then that a young mother stood up, trembling. "It was me. My daughter is sick and I needed more water for the medicine." I didn't know what to do. Instead of anger, there was compassion. The community mobilized to help the child, and they established an emergency fund for special situations. "See," Sam said to Sarah, "you created more than a cooperative. You created a family." When the drought finally passed, they had not only survived but emerged stronger. The cooperation system they created during the crisis became permanent, giving rise to an official agricultural cooperative. Sam, who was now nearly 70, would always say, "Your grandfather planted a seed when he saved those documents. You watered that seed with your courage, and now we are harvesting the fruits." But not everything was work and struggle. Sarah found time to live as well. Her relationship with the teacher, Michael, deepened. They married in a simple ceremony at the farm, with the entire community present. "Are you sure you want to marry me?" Sarah had asked, half joking. "Life with me won't be easy. I'm married to this farm and to this community." "That's exactly why I want to marry you," Michael replied, holding her hands. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. There was no expensive decoration or fancy food, but there was love. There was community. There was authenticity. During the vows, Michael said, "Sarah, when I met you, you were already at war with the world. But I learned that your war wasn't out of anger. It was for justice. And I want to spend the rest of my life fighting by your side." Sarah, who rarely cried in public, let the tears fall. "Michael, you taught me it's possible to fight without losing the ability to love. That being strong doesn't mean being hard. Thank you for showing me I can be a warrior and a woman at the same time." Sam was the one who pronounced them husband and wife in an emotional moment. "By the authority vested in me—" He stopped, too moved to continue. Mrs. Eleanor finished for him. "By the authority of love and community, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The party lasted all night. There was live music, food made by the community, dancing and laughter. It was everything Sarah had ever wanted but never thought she'd have: a chosen family. The first years of marriage were an adjustment. Michael had his ways, Sarah had hers. He was more easygoing, she was more impulsive. He liked to plan, she preferred to act. But it worked, in ways neither of them expected. "You calm me down when I'm about to explode," Sarah would say. "And you push me when I'm too settled," Michael would reply. Together they expanded the educational projects. They built a small school at the farm for the children of the region. Michael taught classes in the morning, and in the afternoon the children learned about farming, sustainability, and the history of the region. "It's important they know where they came from," Sarah explained to the parents, "that they know the struggle of their parents and grandparents. That way they'll value what they have." The school started with 10 students. In 5 years it had over 100. Children from all over the region came to study there, some traveling nearly an hour by bus every day. "Why do you bring your children from so far away?" Sarah asked one mother. "Because here they learn more than reading and writing. They learn about values, about community, about not giving up when things get hard." It was around this time that Sarah and Michael decided to have children. She was already 32 and worried if it wasn't too late. "It's never too late to start building a family," Mrs. Eleanor said. "Look at you. You started from scratch at 25, and look at all you've built." The pregnancy was difficult. Sarah had terrible morning sickness in the first months and had to slow down her frantic work pace. "I don't know how to rest," she complained to Michael. "Then learn. Your son needs a healthy mother, not an exhausted heroine." It was a hard lesson. Sarah had always defined herself by her work, by the struggle. Having to stop, even temporarily, shook her identity. But little by little she began to appreciate the calmer time. She read more, talked more with Mrs. Eleanor, allowed herself to simply exist without always doing something productive. George Jr. was born on a fall morning. He was a strong, loud baby, with his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubbornness. "He's going to be a handful," the midwife said, laughing. "Just like his mother," Sam joked. Holding her son in her arms for the first time was transformative for Sarah. Suddenly she was no longer fighting just for herself or for the community. She was fighting for his future. "You're going to grow up in a better world," she whispered to the baby. "A world we're building for you." Motherhood changed Sarah in ways she hadn't expected. It didn't diminish her determination or her commitment to the community, but it added a new dimension. Now every decision had to consider the impact on the future, on the world she was leaving for her son. When George was 2, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again, this time with a girl. "George is going to have a little sister," she told her young son. "Mommy," he replied, not fully understanding but excited by the news. Mary was born on a rainy spring day. She was smaller than her brother had been, more delicate but with a cry that woke up the entire farm. "This one's going to be a talker," Mrs. Eleanor predicted. "Mark my words." And she was right. Mary started talking early and never stopped. By 3, she was already asking about everything, wanting to understand how things worked, why people did what they did. "Where does the rain come from, Mum? How do plants grow? Why does Grandpa Sam walk so slow?" Sarah answered each question patiently, happy to have a curious daughter. With 2 small children, the house became more chaotic, but also fuller of life and joy. Sam, who had no children of his own, became the grandfather the children adored. "Tell the story again about Grandma Sarah and the hidden documents," George would ask, "but I've told it 1,000 times." "Tell it one more time." And Sam would tell it, always adding new details, always making the children's eyes shine with excitement. The years with young children were intense. Sarah divided her time between motherhood and her work in the community. She didn't always manage to balance it well. There were nights when she cried from exhaustion, days when she felt she was failing as a mother for spending too much time working, and failing as a community leader for spending too much time with her children. "You can't be everything to everyone," Michael said on one of those difficult nights. "You need to choose your battles." "But how do I choose? How do I decide what's more important?" "Maybe it's not about what's more important. Maybe it's about what needs you at this very moment." The advice helped. Sarah began to be more strategic with her time and energy. She delegated more tasks at the cooperative. She established clearer boundaries. And, perhaps most importantly, she allowed herself to ask for help. Mrs. Eleanor became a constant presence, helping with the children when Sarah needed to travel for meetings or hearings. Sam taught George about the land, about the plants, about the animals. "It takes a village to raise a child," Mrs. Eleanor always said. And we are their village. When George was 6, something happened that shook the family. He was bitten by a venomous snake while playing near the river. Sarah will never forget the moment she heard the screams. She ran and found her son on the ground, pale, his leg already swelling. "Snake," he managed to say. "Bit me." The trip to the hospital was desperate. Sarah held her son, praying, promising everything to the heavens if he survived. "Everything's going to be okay, my love. Mommy's here. Everything's going to be okay." At the hospital, there were agonizing hours of waiting. The doctor explained it was a coral snake, extremely venomous, but that they had arrived in time. 15 more minutes and we would have lost him, the doctor said. Sarah nearly fainted at the revelation. 15 minutes. The difference between life and death was 15 minutes. George was hospitalized for a week. Sarah didn't leave his side for a second. Michael brought food, clean clothes, news from home. But she wouldn't leave. "Mom, I'm okay," George would say. "You can go home and rest." "I'll rest here." When they were finally discharged, Sarah was exhausted but infinitely grateful. Arriving home, she hugged Mary so tightly the girl complained, "You're hurting me, Mom." "Sorry, my dear, it's just that Mommy loves you both so much." The accident with George changed something in Sarah. It made her realize that no matter how much she fought for bigger causes, her priority had to be her family. It was no use changing the world if she lost what was most precious to her. She further reduced her direct involvement in the cooperative. She began participating only in strategic decisions, leaving the daily management to others. "Are you stepping away?" someone asked, concerned. "No, I'm delegating. I'm trusting that the community can move forward without me being present at every step. And I need to do this because my children need me." It was a difficult but necessary decision, and she discovered that the community not only survived without her constant presence, but thrived. New leaders emerged. New ideas were implemented. "You built something so strong it no longer needs you to exist," Michael observed. "That is true success." The years went by. George recovered completely from the accident and grew up strong and healthy. Mary became a vibrant and talkative girl, always with 1,000 questions. The country school at the farm continued to grow. The cooperative prospered. The community was more united than ever. But Sarah knew new challenges would always appear. And they did. When George was 10 and Mary 8, a proposal emerged to build a road cutting through the region. The government said it would bring progress, development, opportunities. But Sarah saw beyond the pretty promises. The road would pass right through the middle of several properties that had been reclaimed. It would cut through lands that families had fought for decades to regain. "We can't allow it," she said at a community meeting. "But it's progress," some argued. "We'll be isolated if we don't accept it." Progress that destroys what we've built isn't progress. It's regression by another name. It was the beginning of a new battle, this time not against greedy individuals, but against a bureaucratic machine that seemed unstoppable. Sarah mobilized the community. They conducted environmental and social impact studies. They proposed alternative routes that wouldn't destroy the properties. They brought in experts to show the damage the road would cause. "You're opposing progress," accused a local politician. "No, we're advocating for our kind of progress, the kind that doesn't sacrifice communities in the name of convenience." The fight lasted over a year. There were moments when it seemed they would lose. The government's power, the political pressure, the economic interests were immense. But Sarah had learned something over the years. Public opinion is a powerful force when well mobilized. Eleanor, the granddaughter who would later write the biography, was still a young woman at that time. She used social media brilliantly, creating a campaign that went viral. Shout Defend Our Community became a national trending topic. Journalists from major outlets came to cover the story. Celebrities shared posts of support. The pressure was so great that the government backed down. They presented an alternative route that, although more expensive, didn't destroy the properties. It was an important victory. It proved the community had power, that it could defend itself not just from individuals, but from large institutions. "You never rest, do you?" Michael joked after the victory. "It's not that I don't want to rest. It's that there's always something new to face." "And do you think it will ever end?" "No, but I've learned to choose my battles better. This one was worth it. It was threatening everything we built." Mrs. Eleanor, now over 70, was still a constant presence in the lives of Sarah and the children. "You know you're my heroine, right?" she said to Sarah one day. "Mrs. Eleanor, I'm no one's heroine." "To me you are. I was just an old lady renting out a little room. You gave me purpose. You made me feel part of something important. You were always important. You just needed someone to see it. And you saw it, when no one else did. The relationship between Sarah and Mrs. Eleanor was special. Mrs. Eleanor had become the mother Sarah had lost when she was young, and Sarah was the daughter Mrs. Eleanor never had. They spent hours talking, sharing stories, advising each other. "What do I do when I get tired?" Sarah asked one day. "When I feel like I can't go on?" "You rest, and then you continue. It's like that for everyone. No one can fight forever without stopping. But there's so much to do. And there will keep being. Even after you there will be. You don't have to solve everything alone." They were wise words from someone who had lived a lot and seen a lot. Sam, on the other hand, was more frail. He spent most of his time sitting on the porch, telling stories to anyone who passed by. "I'm getting old," he would say without bitterness, just stating a fact. "You're getting wise," Sarah would correct. "It's the same thing with a different name." George Jr. and Mary adored Grandpa Sam. They spent hours with him, listening about the old days, about what the region was like before, about the struggles that had been fought. "And was Grandma Sarah brave?" Mary would ask. "The bravest I ever knew, but she was also scared, like everyone. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway." These lessons were etched into the children. Years later, when they faced their own challenges, they would remember Grandpa Sam's words. Life at the farm had found a rhythm. It wasn't always peaceful, but it was good. It had routine, but also surprises. It had work, but also joy. Sarah began to realize that for the first time in years, she was genuinely happy. Not happy in spite of the struggles, but happy with the life she had built through them. "You smile more," Michael observed. "I have reasons to smile." "You always did. You're just allowing it now." It was true. For so long, Sarah had felt guilty about any moment of joy, as if she didn't deserve to be happy while there were still injustices to correct. But she was learning that joy and struggle could coexist. That one fed the other. When George Jr. turned 15, he announced he wanted to be a lawyer. "Like Mr. James," he said. Sarah felt a mix of pride and worry. "It's a difficult choice. You'll see a lot of injustice. You'll have to fight a lot." "I know, but you taught me it's worth it." "I taught you that?" "You taught me without speaking. You taught by living." Mary, at 13, still didn't know what she wanted to do. But she loved the land, the plants, the animals. "I think I'll be an agronomist," she would say. "I'll make this land produce even more." Seeing her children growing up with strong values, a sense of justice and love for the community was Sarah's greatest victory. "You did a good job," Mrs. Eleanor said. "We did. You, Michael, Sam, the whole community. They are the result of all of us." It was around this time that Ryan, the cousin who had tried to steal the inheritance, reappeared. He had spent years away, trying to rebuild his life elsewhere. He showed up at the farm one day, visibly ashamed. "I don't know if you'll receive me," he said. Sarah looked at the man who had caused her so much suffering. He was older, thinner, with tired eyes. "What do you want?" "To ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I know I was terrible to you. But I've spent these years thinking about everything I did, and I need to at least try to make amends." Sarah felt anger rise, but also something more. Compassion. Ryan had lost everything to greed. She had gained everything by doing the right thing. In a way, fate had already taken care of justice. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you," she said honestly. "You tried to destroy me. You tried to steal not just the inheritance, but the dignity of many families. I know, and I will spend the rest of my life regretting it. But I also won't carry hatred. I've carried too much weight in my life already. I don't want to add more." It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was a start. Ryan did not stay at the farm. He did not become part of the community. But Sarah allowed him to visit occasionally, to see what had become of the place he had tried to steal. "Why did you let him come back?" Michael asked. "Because holding a grudge only hurts the one who holds it, and because perhaps seeing what he lost is punishment enough. Time kept passing. George started university to study law. Mary decided to study agriculture, as she had said she would. The children were growing up, becoming adults. For Sarah, it was a difficult adjustment. Suddenly the house felt emptier. The kids would visit on weekends, but it wasn't the same. Empty nest syndrome, Mrs. Eleanor diagnosed. Everyone goes through it. But I didn't want them to leave. Neither did they. But that's how it works. We raise our children to fly, not to stay. Sarah used her free time to dedicate herself more to other projects. She began writing about her experience, documenting everything for future generations. It was during this period that she started the book that would eventually be published, focusing not on the legal battles, but on the people. "Why are you writing this?" George asked during a visit. "Because memories get lost, people die, but written stories remain. I want someone 50 years from now to be able to read and understand what really happened." The book took 3 years to write. Sarah revisited every moment, every decision, every person who had been part of the journey. It was a painful process at times, remembering the struggles, the moments of despair. But it was also cathartic, allowing her to process everything she had lived through. When she finally finished, she had a manuscript of over 500 pages. It was honest, raw, but also hopeful. "It's good," Michael said after reading it. "Very good. You should publish it." Who would want to read about a land dispute in the countryside? Anyone who wants to read about justice, about perseverance, about not giving up. A lot of people. Michael was right. A small publisher was interested. The book was published and, to Sarah's surprise, became a moderate success. It wasn't a national bestseller, but it sold well. More importantly, it reached the right hands. Activists, lawyers, people fighting their own battles. Sarah began receiving letters, many letters, from people who had read it and been inspired, who had decided not to give up on their own causes. "You've touched more lives than you realize," Mrs. Eleanor said, seeing the pile of letters. "It wasn't me. It was the story. I was just lucky enough to be part of it." Dr. James, now retired, but still following cases from afar, also wrote a book. His was more technical, focused on the legal aspects of the case. Together, the two books formed a complete portrait, the human and the legal, the emotion and the reason. "We made a good team," he said to Sarah at the launch. "We did, and we still do." Sam, who was growing increasingly frail, asked Sarah to read the book to him. "My eyes aren't as good as they used to be." She read chapters to him every day. Sam listened, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, always commenting. "Do you remember when you almost gave up that stormy night? I remember. If you hadn't shown up the next day, I would have left. But you didn't. And look at all you've built." A week after they finished the book, Sam passed away during the night. He simply didn't wake up. The funeral was immense, with people from all over the region coming to pay their respects. Sam had become a father figure to many, not just to Sarah. "He lived to see it all," Sarah said at the funeral. "He saw justice done. He saw the community prosper. He saw the children grow up. Few are that fortunate." But the pain was deep. Sam had been her first ally, her constant friend, her wise counselor. "He loved you like a daughter," Mrs. Eleanor said, "and you were the daughter he never had." The farm felt emptier without Sam, but his presence remained there in every corner, in every tree he had helped plant, in every story he had told. George, who was in his final year of law school, rushed back for the funeral. "Grandpa Sam taught me so much," he said, crying, "about the land, about people, about not giving up." "And he would be proud of you," Sarah said, "of who you are becoming." Mary was also devastated. Sam had been her constant companion in her studies of the land. "He taught me that land isn't just soil," she said. "It's history, it's people, it's the future." The two siblings promised to honor Sam's memory by continuing the work he had helped start. Mrs. Eleanor was growing increasingly frail as well. At 85, she had trouble walking, and her memory sometimes failed. Sarah brought her to live on the farm permanently in a small but comfortable house. "You don't have to do this," Mrs. Eleanor protested. "Yes, I do. You took care of me when I had no one. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Mrs. Eleanor's final years were peaceful. She spent her days on the porch, receiving visitors, telling stories to her great-grandchildren, Sarah's grandchildren. "I've had a good life," she would often say. "I met amazing people. I was part of something important." When Mrs. Eleanor passed away at 90, Sarah was by her side, holding her hand. "Thank you," Mrs. Eleanor whispered, "for letting me be a part of all this. Thank you for taking me in when I had nothing." They were the last words they exchanged. Mrs. Eleanor closed her eyes and passed away peacefully. Once again the farm was in mourning. First Sam, now Mrs. Eleanor. The older generations were leaving, passing the torch to the new ones. "It's the cycle of life," Michael said, comforting Sarah. "They lived well. They saw everything they helped build. Now it's our turn to continue." Dr. James was also growing frailer. At 90, his mind was still sharp, but his body was failing. Sarah visited him regularly, bringing news from the farm, updating him on the cases George was starting to take. "Your son is going to be a better lawyer than I was," he said one day. "Impossible. You are the best." "No. I had to learn by doing, by making mistakes. He is learning from my successes and my mistakes. He'll start from a higher level." George had graduated top of his class and was already working on social injustice cases, following exactly in Dr. James's footsteps. Mary had returned to the region after graduating and was implementing innovative sustainable agriculture techniques on the farm and neighboring properties. "Our kids turned out amazing," Michael said with pride. "They did, but the credit isn't ours. It's theirs. It's ours too. We set the example. We showed them how to live with integrity." It was true. Sarah and Michael weren't perfect parents. No one is. But they had given their best, and their children were proof it had been worth it. When Sarah was 60, she received an unexpected invitation. A major university in the state capital wanted to award her an honorary doctorate in social sciences. "I didn't even finish college," she protested. "You don't need to. This is recognition for what you've done in practice, for the community you built, for the justice you achieved." Sarah accepted, but with conditions. "I don't want to be the only one honored. I want you to include Sam, Mrs. Eleanor, and Dr. James. Without them, none of this would exist." The university agreed. They held a special ceremony honoring everyone who had been fundamental in the fight. Dr. James was there in a wheelchair, but with the brightest smile. They made a video memorial for Sam and Mrs. Eleanor. When Sarah went up to receive her diploma, the auditorium stood in ovation. She looked at Michael, at the children, at the community that had come to support her, and felt profound gratitude. In her acceptance speech, she said, "I don't deserve this award any more than hundreds of other people who fight for justice every day and are never recognized. I accept it on behalf of all of them, on behalf of all those who refuse to accept injustice, who fight even when it seems impossible, who keep believing even when everyone says to give up." They were simple but powerful words. Many in the audience cried. After the ceremony, several young people approached her. "You inspired me to study law. Your story made me want to work with communities. Because of you, I decided not to give up on my case." Sarah listened to each one, offering words of encouragement, sharing contacts, doing what she could to help. "Do you get tired?" Michael asked on the way back. "Sometimes, but it also energizes me, seeing that the story can make a difference in other people's lives." They returned to the farm and Sarah went back to her routine. At 60, she didn't work with the same intensity as decades ago, but she was still active. She consulted for other communities facing similar problems. She helped George with complex cases. She guided Mary in the agricultural projects. It was a full life, full of purpose. When George announced he was getting married, Sarah cried with joy. "My baby has grown up. Mom, I'm 30 years old. To me, you'll always be my baby." The wedding was at the farm, of course, in a beautiful, simple ceremony full of love. Seeing her son swear eternal love brought back memories of when she and Michael had gotten married. It seemed like yesterday, but it had been over 30 years. Time passes quickly, she commented to Michael. It does. But they were good years. They were the best. Mary also got married 2 years later. Her husband was an environmental engineer who shared her passion for the land. You'll make a good team, Sarah said to her daughter. Like you and Dad. Even better, you're starting with less baggage, fewer problems, but also with less experience. Experience comes. Love you already have. The first grandchildren were born. George had a girl whom they named Eleanor in honor of Mrs. Eleanor. Mary had a boy named Sam in honor of Sam. Sarah became a grandmother at 65. It was a role she adored. Grandma, tell the story of when you arrived here, little Eleanor would ask. Again? I've told it 1,000 times. Tell it one more time. And Sarah would tell it, always with the same emotion, always making her granddaughter's eyes shine. Dr. James passed away at 92. Sarah was by his side. You gave me hope when I had none, she said. And you gave me the most important case of my career, he replied, his voice weak. Thank you for trusting me. I will always trust you, wherever you are. Those were his last words before he passed. Sarah cried a lot, but she was also at peace. Dr. James had lived a long and meaningful life. The funeral was huge. Lawyers from all over the country came. The tribute was deserved for a man who had dedicated his life to justice. George promised to continue the legacy. I'll take on impossible cases like he did. But choose wisely, Sarah advised. Not everything that seems impossible is worth it. Choose causes that matter. The years kept passing. Sarah was 70 when she realized she was finally at peace. It didn't mean there were no more struggles. There always were. But she had learned to choose better, to delegate more, to trust that the community would continue without her needing to control everything. You seem lighter, Michael observed. I feel lighter. I carried so much weight for so long. It's time to share the load. Or to drop it completely. No, never completely. But I don't have to carry it alone anymore. It was a lesson that had taken decades to learn. Little Eleanor grew up hearing stories about the great-grandmother whose name she carried, about the struggle, about the courage, about not giving up. At 8 years old, she asked, Grandma, are you afraid of death? The question caught Sarah by surprise, but she answered honestly, No, dear, I've lived a full life. I did what I came to do. When my time comes, I'll go in peace. But you're important. If you die, who will take care of everything? Nothing depends on just one person, Eleanor. When I arrived here, I thought I had to do everything myself. But I learned that strength lies in the community. When I'm no longer here, you will carry on, and your children, and their children. Is that what a legacy is? Exactly. A legacy isn't having your name on a plaque. It's planting seeds that keep growing long after you're gone. The conversation stayed with Sarah. It made her think about what she truly wanted to leave behind. She decided to do something she had been putting off. Document absolutely everything. Every important document, every story, every lesson learned. She spent the next few years doing exactly that. She created a complete archive at the farm with digital and physical copies of everything. Why so much work? Michael asked. So the truth is never lost. So that, 100 years from now, someone can know exactly what happened. It was meticulous work. Eleanor, her granddaughter, helped, fascinated by every story, every document. Grandma, this could be a museum. Maybe one day it will be. And it was. Years after Sarah's death, the family turned part of the farm into a small community museum, telling the story of the region and the fight for the land. But that was still in the future. In the present, Sarah was 75, in good health, enjoying her grandchildren and seeing the community prosper. One day she received a letter from Grace, the young woman she had met at university years before. Dear Sarah, I write to thank you again. Because of your inspiration, I managed to recover my family's land. It was an 8-year fight, but it was worth every second. Now we are building a cooperative similar to yours. You planted another seed, and it is growing strong. With eternal gratitude, Grace, Sarah cried, reading the letter. It was confirmation that her work had gone beyond the farm, beyond the region. It was inspiring a movement. You changed the world, Michael said. I didn't change the world. I changed a small corner of it. and other people are changing other corners. Together, perhaps we can achieve something greater. That's how Sarah saw it, not as a solitary heroine, but as part of a larger movement of people fighting for justice. When she turned 80, the community organized a huge party. People came from all over the country. People she had helped directly or indirectly over the years. 80 years, she said in her speech. Who would have thought I'd live to see it? And who would have thought I'd live so well, surrounded by so much love? The applause was long, but Sarah was tired. 80 years weigh on you no matter how well lived. She began to slow down even more. She spent more time resting, less time in meetings and events. It's time, she said to Michael. It's time to really let go. Are you sure? I am. I fought my whole life. Now I just want to live what's left in peace. And that's what she did. Sarah's last years were peaceful. She spent her days with Michael, with her grandchildren, reading, resting. She didn't stop being involved completely. She still gave advice when asked. She still participated in important decisions. But she was no longer the leader, she was the advisor. How do you know when it's time to pass the torch? Someone asked. When you realize the next generation can do as well or better than you. And when you realize that holding on to the torch is keeping them from growing. George had become a renowned lawyer, specializing in community causes. Mary was revolutionizing sustainable agriculture throughout the region. They surpassed us, Sarah said to Michael with pride. They didn't surpass. They built upon what we left. It's different. It's better. Michael was growing fragile too. At 85, he had increasing health problems. I'm tired, he confessed to Sarah in private moments. Me too. But it was a good life, right? The best. No regrets, Sarah thought. A few. There always are. Things I could have done differently, but overall, no. I did the best I could with what I had. That's all anyone can do. Michael had a mild stroke. He recovered but became more fragile. He started using a wheelchair. I hate this, he complained, but you're alive. That's what matters. For how long? For as long as we have, and we'll enjoy every second. And they did. Even with the limitations, they found joy in the small moments. A beautiful sunset, a visit from the grandchildren, a deep conversation. You know I love you, right? Michael said one day. I know. And you know I love you too? I know. I always have. They sat in silence for a while, just holding hands, appreciating each other's company. When Sarah was 85, she began writing letters to her grandchildren, not to be read now, but for when she was no longer there. In each letter, she shared life lessons, stories she hadn't told, advice she thought important. To Eleanor, my dear granddaughter, you carry the name of a special woman, Mrs. Eleanor, who took me in when I had nothing. I hope you also have that generosity of spirit. Never let anyone tell you you can't do something because you're a woman, or young, or any other excuse. I was just a young woman alone when I arrived here, and look what I achieved. Not because I was special, but because I refused to accept limitations others tried to impose. With all my love, Grandma Sarah. To Sam, her grandson. My dear Sam, you have the name of a great man who was my first ally and friend. Sam had a quiet wisdom, a constant kindness. I hope you develop those qualities too. Remember, being strong doesn't mean being hard. Being a leader doesn't mean being authoritarian. The most powerful people I knew were kind, but firm in their principles. With all my love, Grandma Sarah. She wrote letters to all the grandchildren, each one personalized, each with specific messages. Michael found her writing one day. Farewell letters? Not farewell. Continuity. I want them to have something of mine to keep. They already do. They have your memories, your teachings, your example. But that can be lost with time. Written words remain. Michael understood. He himself began writing his own letters. The two spent weeks on this task, sharing memories, laughing at old stories, sometimes crying. It's been an incredible journey, Michael said when they finished. It has, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Sarah's health began to decline at 90. Nothing dramatic, just the natural wear of nearly a full century of life. She spent more time in bed, less on the porch. Visits tired her out faster. "Mom, you need to rest more," George insisted. "I'll rest soon, forever. While I can, I want to live." She was stubborn to the end. At 93, Sarah asked to be taken to the porch one last time. They wanted to wait, but she insisted. "It might be the last time I see this," she said. They took her in the wheelchair. It was a full moon night, and the farm was bathed in silvery light. "It's so beautiful," she whispered. "Yes, Mom," Mary said, with tears in her eyes. "When I first arrived here, it was just destruction. Look what it became. You did this. We did it. All of us." Sarah Miller stayed there for hours, simply looking, absorbing every detail to take with her wherever she was going. She saw the lit-up houses, heard distant laughter, smelled the earth after a recent rain. "It's time to go back, Mom," George said gently. "One more moment, just one more." Finally, she agreed to return. That night, she slept deeply. And in the morning, Michael found her like that, with a peaceful smile on her face. Sarah Miller had passed away peacefully after a long and full life. The funeral was historic. Thousands of people came. There were 3 generations of families she had helped. There were lawyers inspired by her case. There were activists following in her footsteps. There were students studying her history. George gave the main speech, his voice choked with emotion. "My mother always said she wasn't a heroine, that she was just a person who refused to accept injustice. But to us she was so much more. She was proof that one person can change the world." Mary added, "She taught us that legacy isn't about money or land. It's about values, about justice, about doing what's right. That's the legacy she left." Eleanor, the granddaughter, read a passage from the letter her great-great-grandfather George had left so many years ago. "The only legacy truly worth leaving is the truth." Grandma left much more than truth. She left hope. They buried Sarah on the farm, next to where Sam and Mrs. Eleanor already were. On the headstone, Sarah Miller, 1995-2090. She refused the easy money and chose the hard truth, and changed everything. Michael survived only 2 years without her. When he passed, he was buried beside her as he had requested. Life went on. George and Mary kept the farm running. The grandchildren grew up hearing stories of their great-grandmother. The great-grandchildren did too. 100 years after Sarah had first arrived at the farm, the community held a celebration. The place was unrecognizable compared to that abandoned plot. It was prosperous, vibrant, full of life, a model of a sustainable community, and at the center of it all the memorial. Not just for Sarah, but for all who had fought. Sam, Mrs. Eleanor, Dr. James, Frank, and so many others. One of Sarah's great-great-grandsons, named George after his great-grandfather, looked at the old photos. "Was it all real?" he asked his father. "Did all this really happen?" "It happened, and it's documented, every part." "Was she brave?" "The bravest. But she was also scared, had doubts. She was human. And that's exactly why she succeeded. Because she fought despite the fear, not without it." The boy looked at the thriving farm around him. "And will it last? All this that she built?" "It will last as long as we remember, as long as we honor the values she stood for, as long as we keep fighting for justice, for truth, for community. So will it last forever? If it's up to us, yes." And so it was. Sarah's story wasn't just about a woman who had fought for her inheritance. It was about what we do with the opportunities life gives us. She could have accepted that $1,000 on the first day and left. It would have been easier. It would have avoided years of struggle and suffering, but she would have lost everything that truly mattered: the community, the purpose, the certainty that she had made a difference. The farm continued to be a symbol of hope for generations, proof that one person, a single person with courage and determination, can change not only their own destiny but that of hundreds of others. And the lesson remained: True inheritance is not what you receive, but what you do with it. It's not about accumulating, it's about building. It's not about you, it's about everyone. Sarah Miller had received an abandoned farm and a box of old documents, and she turned that into a legacy that would touch generations, not because she was special, not because she had unique skills, but simply because she refused to give up, because she chose the hard path over the easy one, because she believed the truth was worth defending, and in the end, that choice made all the difference. End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought. Do you believe Sarah made the right choices by refusing the easy money? Leave your honest opinion in the comments with sincere words. If this story touched you, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.